Alrighty. Welcome, guys, to Interview Thursday. We are back again. Let me go ahead and make sure everything is looking good here on my end. It sounds good. And we have a special guest with us today. His name is Darcy Linde, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Lindy.
Linde. Awesome. Where does that last name come from? What origin?
Probably Swedish or
Oh, cool.
German.
Sweet.
I might say it differently there too. Maybe like Linda.
Oh.
So really as you like.
Awesome. Well, he's already I very much liked him. We had a small chat before our interview, and I'm very excited to learn from him today. So, Darcy, go ahead and tell us something. Tell us about you. What you do in life.
What I do.
Sorry, I'm
So
tired.
yeah, no worries. So essentially right now, I am jobless, as many people are. What I do primarily is software development, and I'm going to be going to grad school for that shortly. Come January at Georgia Tech. So I'm back home in Atlanta, getting ready for that.
Great.
So that's the broad scope of what I do.
And
In a more professional manner. And then I guess hobby wise, I do a lot of chess. So
okay. So chess is not your main career or anything.
no,
Oh,
not at the moment.
awesome. And what got you into chess?
So that's a great question because I don't remember. I was very young. And what I've been told was that I was taught to play chess by my mom because I was too destructive. I needed something to keep me focused and quiet for a little while.
Hmm.
And then I had a chess club at elementary school. I did fairly well, and it was one of the few games where I wouldn't have too many sour grapes, and I'd want to play again. So it just kind of took off in that way.
That's really cool. And when you're saying that you're, I guess, a rambunctious child.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd be fair.
For me personally, it was from ADHD. Did you have anything like that, or
Never diagnosed. No.
okay? Because I found that chess helped me personally when it came to controlling myself and uh, you know, being in a better
Yeah, no,
manner.
I do that a lot. A great example of that would be Grandmaster Eric Hansen. He's a very well-known
Hey, good
chess,
point.
um, Twitch, YouTube
Mm-hmm.
personality, and he talks about how chess was his go-to. Even with the ADHD, it helped him, collect his thoughts, and you can go as far as you want. Basically, is the story there.
Right. And this is kind of really a rough day for me today because it's hard for me to think and have a coherent thought. So I'm gonna rely on you to help me out here. When it comes to chess here in Florida, what is it that you do specifically? Like how? Because I know that you work for Brian Tillis
hmm
as well for Palm Beach Chess. How did that come about?
Well, I've known Brian for a long time.
Hmm.
We met. I don't remember the exact year, but it would have been one of the years where I was a camper at Castle Chess Camp in. That's a annual summer camp that happens at Emory University in
Hmm.
Atlanta. I'm an Atlanta resident, so I was there just as a camper and probably crossed paths that way. Brian was a camper back in his day too, but he would have been a counselor of some sort by the time I was there, and then eventually he was an instructor there and a very successful one at that.
Hmm.
And I became a counselor a couple times as well.
Hmm.
Just really going through the same sort of trajectory. Although I don't think they're going to be hiring me to teach anytime soon. I'm a little too low rated for their standards. They're a very quality camp.
Yeah, I mean, over the years too, I'm sure they've also improved on their not
Yeah,
qualities.
yeah,
What
yeah.
was the word?
They get some incredible talent. Like
Mhm.
it used to be just a handful. Maybe 10 years ago, it used to be a handful of maybe one or two GMs,
Hmm.
and maybe, and then you have a bunch of local strong players. But then that just it took off, especially around the time when I was becoming a counselor there, like in
Hmm.
20.
And guys, also, Darcy here is a huge fan of Lord of the Rings. So if you got some specific questions for him on that as well, go ahead and feel free to throw it
Yeah,
down there in the comments.
yeah,
Um, so let's
what's
go
his?
ahead and get started. What is it you're going to be showing for us today?
Sure, but actually, just I was really rambling there. Let me just to wrap up what I was doing with Brian in Florida. I
I'm
met
so sorry. Go ahead.
no, I that's where I met Brian.
Huh?
I was doing a lot of chess teaching in Chicago. I was going to school undergrad in Chicago, and I was teaching in the schools there. And I was really trying to figure out what is my path in life, what I was trying to do. And I originally reached out to Brian on the premise of just he's a teacher,
Hmm.
not just that he's a chess teacher, but he's a teacher in general, full time teacher. I wanted his perspective on education, and through that back and forth, I became he enlightened me to Palm Beach Chess, what he was trying to build down in Florida, and that's how I got uh, on the path to working for Brian in
Awesome.
Florida. So yeah, so now we can. That was the
No, thank you, thank you. Like I said, you're going to be helping me out here today as well because it's going to be a rough one for me.
yeah.
So it's all you. You have the spotlight. Go ahead and take us away.
Okay, well, so I thought the theme of today was chess psychology.
Hmm.
So psychology of competition specifically. So I picked out two interesting games here. Um, what makes them interesting is they're both games I played against strong opponents. So people who I should uh, expect to lose to over a large match series. So I see already you've got queued up my game against Edward Song.
Hmm.
So this is an interesting game. It's the more recent of the two. What made this game interesting was that it happened at a Pan American Collegiate Championship. I was playing every year in this annual collegiate event with my team, and our team was pretty strong. I think I was board 8, so they had A team and a B team for this event. And this game happened in 2018.
Okay. Yeah, it's still pretty
Um,
recent.
Actually, no, this would have been 2017 because they hold it right before the end of the year.
Okay.
So yeah, so it's fairly recent, a few years ago. I was playing board 4 on B team, and we were playing against a Michigan team. So my opponent here is Strong FM, who I think is now an IM,
All
if I'm
right.
not. I need to,
And
and
yeah, I was just wondering if you could set more of the stage here as to what round of the tournament it was, and what the
sure,
current score is like for your team.
sure. So I think this was. I might have this in the. I think this was round 2.
Okay.
We probably won our first round. I think we were over that kind of the hump for the. You get paired down. The first half, top half gets paired down on the bottom half. So
Right.
we were probably somewhere in the 70th percentile. So we probably played a pretty like a 1800 average team or something
Hmm.
round 1, and then we get paired up against University of Michigan's A team. So their whole team was expected to destroy us. And so yeah, if you think about, they have a strong FM on board 4. So I think we didn't even end up losing this round 3-1.
Hmm.
But as I think the scores are already revealing here, I did manage to. This is the one that got away
All
from.
right. And
So
did you by any chance win the upset of the tournament, or is that another
no,
good
they
those prizes?
usually in these kinds of tournaments, you have tons of underrated players who are maybe never played in a tournament or played in very few tournaments. So you'll
Mhm.
have players that are like 1200 that will upset a 2000 or something.
Right.
That's quite common. An upset like this is very nice, and that that metric doesn't really scale because you can think about it. Once you're at the high rating, it's harder and harder. Like 50 points at the FM level is the same as like 200 points at the 1200 level.
Right.
But yeah, so definitely didn't get like the upset of the tournament, but this was one of the probably maybe the best rated victory I've had in my tournament.
All right.
Uh,
Congratulations.
so yeah, this is definitely a nice one.
Mhm.
So context for this game, I
Yeah.
looked this guy up beforehand. You get the pairings, a few hours at least, or maybe the night before. Um, I don't remember exactly how the schedule went, if this was the second game of the day or if we had game 1 on Friday night and then, this was Saturday morning. I don't quite remember,
Mhm.
but I had some time to look uh, at his profile forehand, and since he's a strong player, he has plenty of games to rifle through. I found a game. Also, for context, I was already primarily a London player, so I was looking specifically for his games where he played against the London system. I found a game that really stuck out to me because it was played by a Georgian player, like the state of Georgia, not the country,
Hmm.
named Ben Moon, and he's a few
I know
years
that
younger
name.
than me. Yeah, he has some notoriety in the South. I think he's also an FM now, if I'm not mistaken.
Hmm.
Very strong player as a kid, and then continued to be strong as he got older. So that
Right.
name stuck out to me. I saw that he'd played this game and he'd beaten Edward in some game, maybe within like the last year of when I was going to play him. So I and it ended up being a very aggressive attempt against his specific defense against the London.
Hmm.
So psychologically, I remembered something Brian once told me that when you're attacking a higher rated player, it's so uncomfortable, and that really resonated with me because it's so true. Every time I play a lower rated player, I'm the one in the hot seat. I don't like to be attacked. It's harder to defend, or at least I find it's harder to defend. I think most people find it harder to defend than to attack because a lot of attacks play themselves. Like, and even if it's a little dubious, if it takes one slip up for the defense to crumble,
Hmm.
and it takes like maybe a bunch of slip ups for the attack to peter out.
Right. And you don't normally see an attack from a London system, so this would be very interesting to see.
Yeah, so we can start jumping into it. That's enough of a preface. So
Yeah.
basically, I had a plan, and we'll see what that looked like.
How's it going? Why not chess? Thank you for joining us today.
So basically, here, the setup that he employed is actually one that Brian himself has employed on numerous occasions. The opening moves here are pretty standard. You
Hmm.
can see that I'm gonna if I can get my arrows down. I'm gonna play
You're
all
good.
the London moves, maybe Bishop B5, depending on Black's setup. And there are other ways that Black could have played more combatively, especially since he started with C5. In
Hmm.
fact, if I remember correctly, the reason why Gadakomsky doesn't play the two bishop f4 move is because of this, because it allows Black to play very quickly with these setups.
Right.
Is to first play knight f3, knight f6, and then kind of get into it. So my opponent definitely had some opportunities to deviate from his setup here, but he didn't, which was great. And basically, this is the system that I saw that he employed.
Okay.
I think more common here is to play maybe bishop d6 or bishop e7,
Hmm.
challenge the bishop, or prepare to play knight h5 and kind of trap the bishop that way, get the knight for the bishop. But there's another system where you do that without preparing it.
Hmm.
And so,
And you already have a somewhat psychological edge here because you have preparation. You're still in your preparation. You expected this line.
yeah, exactly. He has no idea what I'm going to play, but I'm still in my preparation for the
Hmm.
game. And what I found was that this move. So there was a US championship game in 2017. So this would have been like the same year
Yeah.
where Gadakomsky played this exact variation against Nakamura. So, very topical at the time.
Yeah.
And it was so aggressive, and I don't think my opponent had really, maybe he'd seen it before, but maybe never faced it before because he was kind of taken aback. He took a lot of time. I had my preparation was pretty shallow, I'll admit.
Okay.
I have a lot of time before the game. I'd never played this before. It's very sharp,
Hmm.
but I felt like I was going to be the one in the driver's seat. I looked at some critical lines. I quickly memorized the game because it was a pretty short draw, if I remember.
Okay.
And it involves sacrificing a pawn for white because you can see here the move that white plays here is h4. It's very aggressively minded, and you're willing to give up a pawn here on e5 just to lodge to do some shenanigans against the king side here because already with, let's say, yeah, already we have some threats here that are going to just totally disrupt the black pawns,
Hmm.
get some extra attack and pressure on this pawn because you can see that the pawn will be pinned after we take once because you can't take back or lose the rook, and you
Right.
almost certainly don't want to castle into it. So
Yeah, the
this,
positionary feels very messy.
yeah, it's surprisingly. I mean, the game that I think that Nakamura played. I don't remember if he took he he did something similar,
Mhm.
or he didn't take the pawn, or he took the pawn in a different way. And like even when you accept the pawn, it ended up being kind of a draw. So very dangerous for black for sure. Maybe it's harder to see uh, on the larger scale here, but once you go a few moves, you can see all sorts of threats pop up.
Right.
This is what I was planning. But here's so my opponent took a lot of time and played the move f6. So he's out of book. I'm out of book. This is the now we have this position. So
And everyone has Ben Feingold in their head right now saying never play f6.
never. Well, I mean, this is a good example for his rule to apply. It didn't turn out so well for my opponent. A lot of weaknesses come up from this move.
Mhm.
So I'm in the attacking mindset. I can't. I don't want to like. I don't want to play a move like knight d3, knight f3. I'll give the initiative to my opponent. E5 is going to come and start attacking and cramping my pieces.
Right.
I've made some serious concessions here to do the attack. I need to follow through.
Right.
So the only move that really kind of makes sense to me is to take. You've got to keep the initiative. I'm not really harming my position by swapping these knights, and then I'll get to play h5. And
Ah.
so yeah, h5 was consistent, continuing to pose threats. Keep. I don't really have a development advantage, but I think it's easier for me to get my pieces into the attack than it is for him to get like the counterpart piece into the defense.
Mhm.
So
And you're just trying to slow him down from playing e5.
yeah, and he's
Okay.
yeah. I don't want him to play e5. Also, I need to. I mean, this is my greatest threat in the position. I'm gonna mess up his pawns.
Mhm.
I'm going to activate my rook. I'm gonna weaken this pawn and then play bishop to d3,
Mhm.
attack it again. These are the kinds of thoughts I have. I'd love to keep pressing forward with tempo, with
Okay.
initiative.
And out of curiosity, for the team aspect of the tournament,
Hmm.
were you playing this game not so much for your team but for yourself to see if you can push your limits?
A little bit of both. It's easier to play too when you know that your team is severely an underdog. You may
Okay.
as well go for it.
Mhm.
I do feel like I don't. So I don't really think I have the whole team part in my mind. I'm always playing my game. I'm not trying to weigh myself down with extra pressure.
Right.
But I also find that I perform better in team tournaments. Like every team tournament I played in, I've typically overperformed. And in fact, in this tournament, I went 6 out of 7
Oh
for
wow.
my. Yeah, I gained like 40 points. It was great.
Nice job.
So I don't know if the team aspect had anything really to do with it. If I got just extraordinarily lucky this over this weekend, or if my opponents had bad games. Not enough. The sample size too small. But
Okay.
yeah, so I think that's how I would say it. The team aspect definitely going for broke here. I'm not playing, with the pressure of holding at my team,
Mhm.
but the team is probably kind of cheering me on mentally.
Feel free to continue. Thank you.
Yeah. So this is the whole. So this is really to show the idea here of the psychology of the attack here.
Mhm.
It's that my opponent's uncomfortable. I'm kind of in the driver's seat psychologically because I think I'm still playing relatively fast.
Mhm.
F6 probably made me take a think here, but he's got everything to lose. So
Right.
moving forward, he takes, and then I can take back right away. But I thought I would keep pressing forward a bit. I don't have to take because I can play bishop to d3, and it's just not feasible. Taking on g5, or sorry, yeah, if he
Mhm.
takes on, sorry, on g4,
Mhm.
he gets killed. Basically, he can't defend the knight and the pawn, and my rook is opened. I'm in a queenside castle.
Mhm.
This is something gone terribly wrong for black.
Right.
So I thought I would keep playing kind of with this initiative, this mindset of going for it. Very importantly, I did spend some time calculating here because I anticipated a sacrifice, which is going to come up. What happens if black plays e5 and then e4? Like, what happens to my position? If he can just shut me down,
Hmm.
if I have to come back, then the bishop isn't placed well on d3. So that's something that's a serious problem that I had to contend with from afar. So from this position, it was, yeah, I definitely took some time here because it's a very complicated. Like the next few moves really set the stage for the whole thing. But what I realized was that if he takes the extra time, if I play bishop d3 and he takes the extra time to play e5 and e4,
Hmm.
that's already too tempy. I remember, and this may have been something I learned from Brian as well. There's a Gary Kasparov quote that uh, a, it's something like a piece is worth or a pawn is worth three tempi.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that's how it goes. A pawn is worth three tempi, and so here I would, in that situation where the pawn was on e4,
Hmm.
and I maybe sacrifice a piece for it, I get I basically get two pawns for the piece, and then if he spent some three turns to get there, then that's the third pawn. So it's like a fair sacrifice. So
Okay, playing for time on the board.
yeah, intuitively, it's not even that big of a sacrifice.
Hmm.
It's a fair trade. So that was part of my thought going into it. So I was definitely playing in large part on intuition here and some chess proverbs you could say to help me shortcut my calculation because
Which
the
really
calculation
works.
was very messy. It did end up working, and it was a I think it was sound.
Mhm.
Maybe it's a slightly dubious position for white from a computer standpoint, but from a human standpoint, it looks pretty vicious because
Yeah.
we ended up getting this after all. Played e4. This is what I expected,
Mhm.
and I took. So the third tempi, I think that was two tempi, e5, e4,
Mhm.
and here's where I say it's slightly dubious for white because my opponent played already a bad move, and you could tell that he's in the defensive mindset. He's the one that's under pressure, and this is exactly what I was playing for because the best move here is not the natural bishop d7,
Hmm.
which is what I expected him to play and is what he played. The problem with a move like bishop d7 is that it's exactly what I wanted. I get to keep playing forward. I get to keep developing and making threats. He's reacting passively to a threat, and the question is, well, of course, bishop takes c6 is a threat, isn't it? Like, what happens if I can just get an exchange too? I think I'll definitely have the better side of the material
Right.
advantage. But unfortunately, in this position, all black has to do is move the rook out of the way. This is another instance of reclaiming initiative. I don't even know if I want to take this pawn on c6 because if I do take it, it's a different scenario entirely. I think he can probably even play bishop to d7. I
Mhm.
don't actually want to trade this bishop. This is my most important attacking piece. It's the one that's hitting all these vulnerable squares because his bishop's been out of play.
Right.
And
And in comparison to your other bishop, definitely far stronger.
yeah, and I did give up a piece, and I don't know if there's too many pieces left on the board. I don't think that the three pawns is going to be worth the piece
Hmm.
here. His king is pretty exposed, but I have problems too. I my pawn on b2 is weak, so if I'm having to spend time to maybe preserve my bishop or defend my pawn to keep my position together, I don't think I've actually got the better side of it, and I think the computer agrees
Hmm.
that black is slightly better. But that's kind of a hard thing to see if you don't have the right mentality. And I think psychologically, my opponent was already under a lot of pressure here.
Especially with you already, throwing punch after punch after punch at him.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going for his throat, and he's got to. Not only is he wanting to protect his rating, he wants to protect his team.
Hmm.
He's got a lot of reasons to be defensive here.
Right.
So I keep going forward. H6
Hmm.
makes a lot of sense. Attack
Well,
the knight. The queen can come in
yeah. Welcome to the
here.
chat. I am Yang. Thank you for joining. Sorry, go ahead.
So no, 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 you're fine. I should be keeping an eye on chat as well.
Hmm. They're just saying hello. They're listening to you.
Okay, perfect. Here, I actually missed the best opportunity here. I can
Okay.
show exactly why. This is another important psychological moment in games. When you calculate something ahead of time and it's working out exactly as you calculated, it's still very, very, very much worth rechecking if there's something better because And my whole calculation here, exactly like I showed here, my idea was to follow up with queen to h5 and give this check. And these are all the lines that I looked at. But what I didn't realize was that d5
Mm-hmm.
immediately is much stronger, because if I play queen h5 check first, like I did in the game, and his king moves up, he defends his bishop. I mean, his king is still in the center, sure, but he defends his bishop. But if I were to play d5 first and I recapture his bishop's undefended, it's another, crucial tempo. This is a winning position for white. I'm on a queenside castle
Mm-hmm.
and it's completely stuck. This is just it's very good, because white's really limiting black's options here. How is black supposed to defend?
You don't. That looks really scary.
All sorts of, I mean, I could have sacrifice threats. I could find ways to get my pieces in. I don't know specifically about that move, but
Mm-hmm.
all sorts of possibilities that can rise up. I think the computer, I don't remember what the eval was, but it's like +2 or something.
Mm-hmm.
Here we get the same position, but I've wasted its tempo. It felt good to do it, but it just wasn't helpful. It actually helped black defend a bit better.
Mm-hmm.
And here it's not the same. If I take, I've basically lost a tempo over the same position. So I played a different move here. I played bishop takes d5. Luckily, I didn't realize I'd messed this up in that small little way during the game. Something like that can really make you doubt yourself. And when you're attacking, you definitely don't want to doubt yourself.
Right.
But
That is a hard feeling to get past.
right. But even here, yes, very difficult position. And also importantly, yeah, I calculated some more things. With,
Arrows.
yeah, arrows everywhere. I forgot I had so many arrows.
You're good.
Basically, the idea is that this is a threat in some cases, because even if the knight were to take back, suddenly I've unleashed my bishop and queen to converge. I can start attacking the king
Mm-hmm.
a bit. I don't know about the exact implementation here, but these are the idea. Like, that's something that he now has to always watch out for, and that's what's so difficult about defending. At every moment, you have to recalculate what's changed, what's different. Can white do this now? For the moment, my pawn's still defended as well, which is nice. When we get to a position like this, and already we're about 24 moves in the game, but I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, he's really low on time.
Mm-hmm.
Because he had this huge computational problem of checking all these lines, making sure that rook g7 wasn't a threat at any point, and all the previous moves, trying to figure out the opening. He's super low on time. I have significantly more time than him. And b3, I calculated, of course, some things. I need to make sure that I don't get attacked. One of the things he really sunk some time into was that he was wanting to do the sacrifice. I'm almost positive.
Mm-hmm.
Counter sacrifice, get his queen in here. But I think we both calculated it. I think my king just runs away. And then that's a rook, so he can't just do that. He can't do that without being certain.
Right.
So I just try to play
I mean, you also need to have the presence of mind that if you were to actually pull it off and sacrifice his rook, you got to still defend perfectly.
Yeah, exactly.
So, were you kind of relieved he didn't go for it?
Yeah, for
Okay.
sure. He went for it. It would indicate to me that I had miscalculated something. It would have been a huge, like, oh man, you gotta be kidding. I thought I was safe. So maybe I would have, if it happened, it was a blunder by him. And it would have been a blunder by him. I think I checked after the game. But if he'd played it, I would have been sweating pretty hard.
That's very interesting because that's more of like a gamble type of move. Knowing that if you really want to put your opponent back on their back foot, that's probably what you need to do to try and win.
Hit them with their own medicine,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak. So yeah, there are other moves besides b3. I think I also calculated rook to d2.
Mm-hmm.
But what I ended up realizing was that, or what I remember thinking in the game was that it might be really important to have my rooks connected, and also if I play rook to d2 and then I move this rook at some point, I always have to contend with maybe checks on the back rank.
Right.
I don't know if I had a real super concrete reason for choosing b3 over rook to d2, like a certain line that I saw, but it was like a combination. Enough of these things add up, and you think, all right, it's just not worth it. Let's just play b3.
Mm-hmm.
what's the worst that can happen. And it was solid enough. I didn't feel like there was going to be any follow up problems to my king can hide in the corner if need be, or step up if I'm careful.
Mhm.
So we get to a point where he plays rook to g8 and he allows me to do this because at the very least I'll be able to win some material back. I'll get my queen in. I can retake with the pawn and then suddenly have a passed pawn.
Right.
This is what happened. He ended up taking with the rook though. I think I have a line here. Yeah, takes and I just win the rook.
Yeah.
So yeah, so this is what I calculated in the game. It's been a while since I've seen this game.
That's all good.
Yeah, but that's exactly like he had to calculate every moment, and he picked a moment where it wasn't great. He allowed me to come in with my rook, which is what he was trying not to do.
Hmm.
And so yeah, I guess that's the problem when you shoot up so much time. I can just defend the pawn simply. And I noticed I highlighted the two pawns here.
Yeah, it's
This was
really it's interesting that you're down a full piece, but it doesn't feel like it. It feels just like you still have an attack going.
well, if you think about it, right now these two are kind of holding each other at bay.
Yeah.
This one's doing nothing. Like my counterpart piece is much stronger. It's the initiative is such a funny thing where the material value is like it's like I'm gonna make a dumb analogy here. Like maybe like a stock. You're investing in the future
Hmm.
of your pieces, and that your pieces' values definitely change depending on where they're placed or what they're surrounded by. In this case, my opponent's pieces aren't very well placed. So even though I have fewer of them, it totally makes up for the disadvantage in because the material count is really a measure of the overall activity of your position, right? Like if you have more pieces, you expect to have a more active position.
Hmm.
But if I have like seriously more active pieces, then it doesn't matter if you have more of them if they're all low quality pieces. So that's kind of the idea here.
Right.
that
And I
I'm
think
going
Brian says time, material, and quality.
exactly, yeah, yeah. That's a perfect Brian quote. Like Kasparov triumphant. So it's fine. It's not really a Brian quote. It's like that scene. It's from The Office where it's like you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Michael Scott, and then quoting someone else
Yeah.
in The Office. So the same principle here. So we play a few more moves. You can see I'm continuing to defend against some of his threats while throwing more pressure here. And I think I have noted here, that my opponent at this point is in very immense time pressure. I like that I have these notes. I wrote most of these notes immediately after I played the game.
Hmm.
That's a very, if any of the viewers don't do that, highly recommend doing that. You will forget things immediately. You'll forget what lines you were calculating. You'll forget what your thoughts were at certain key moments. And that's very valuable information
Hmm.
to analyze later, to show to a coach, especially if you're not going to analyze that game with a coach for weeks. Definitely got to write that down. So here I was able to note that my opponent was probably in less than 5 minutes, or I write he's practically living off the increment, so probably in the 1 minute range.
Right.
That's recipe for losing.
Yeah.
For wondering. So here's
what
another
what was
moment.
your time at roughly?
I probably had like 15 minutes.
Oh, that's
I
plenty. Yeah.
yeah, I had probably, not I can't think forever, but when your opponent's living off the increment, it's like it's more than you could possibly want. You feel very rich in time.
Hmm.
So this is another psychological key moment because they're like you see this more in blitz, but when one person's really low on time, it's not a good idea to give your opponent easy moves. Like if I were to start trading things,
Hmm.
well, I probably will have only one option to recapture to follow through with the trade. I give my opponent easy moves. I don't want to do that. I want my opponent to continue thinking, to have to figure things out.
Right.
And so it's also something that you know Brian I think does very well in his blitz games is that he's very very solid, especially in time pressure.
Hmm.
So the move I played here was a psychological move. I just played King B2. All the attack is still there. My opponent's really tied up, and I just play a solid move. So now I can move my bishop without worrying about the C3 pawn.
Hmm.
And my opponent goes astray a bit. A5 is not a good move. I play queen d3. There's actually queen d3 is actually not a good move for
Okay.
some very amazing tactical reason. Knight c5 is possible, and even if I bring my queen out, there's this amazing intermediate move, bishop e6. But you have to be stockfish to see this in the kind of time pressure my opponent was in.
Oh gosh,
Because
opening up the knight for the. Oh my god.
yeah, so the problem for me is that even if I go after the rook, I get mated.
Yeah.
So that would have been very hard to see. I missed it. My opponent missed it.
hmm
So yeah, so now he's going. He misses my threat though, because I just played solidly. I made some very kind of subtle threats. He missed my move. F4, arrows galore. Defender wins. The knight is pinned, and if he doesn't take it, then he's out of options.
hmm
Move like a3 doesn't bother me. I'm definitely not going to take that and give him any sort of checks. Just step out of the way.
hmm
Like the ball's back in your court. What are you going to do? Took an f4, but this already allowed me to simplify. Yeah, I went through that kind of quick.
Now,
Uh,
in most tournaments, when there's a huge rating difference, normally a lot of players start gathering around your table, and especially when the guy is in time trouble and stuff. Did that
yeah.
happen to you?
No, in this case, because it was a team competition,
Uh-huh.
they didn't want lots of people going through the tournament hall. Like when you're done, like you don't want there to be a chance of teammates communicating with each other.
Right.
Uh, Basically, any rule infractions, or at least even persuading people to try it. So yeah, when you're done, you kind of like sign the 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 score sheets and you mark the score because in the team competitions you'll have like a score sheet at the head of the table
hmm
where you'll mark the result, and when all the results are marked, the team captain will sign off on it, um, for both team captains, and then that's what you'll turn into the arbiters.
hmm
So you don't really have to go mark your score on the wall or something.
Yeah,
And
some people like myself, when it comes to that, I have like outside factors bother me a lot. Um,
oh yeah,
Example, I would go ahead and I have a normal game against it's like a Space Coast, and then uh, Alexander Bortnik stopped at my board and looked at the game just for maybe 5 seconds and then walked away. But the thing was, I was thinking about it. And Brian got on my case for it because he's like, why are you letting outside? Why does it matter? You're just feeding to your own ego. There's no reason for you to be bothered by somebody else watching you.
that's true. Although I will say my ego's always hungry. So
Okay.
I've definitely had that feeling where someone who I recognized came over to my board, and it was kind of like a, it's a good feeling, but it's conversely true that it's like looking over your shoulder when you're running a sprint. Like you're not doing yourself any favors. It is. I agree. It's feeding your ego, but it does
Mhm.
feel good. So
That is a great analogy. I never heard that one before. Thank you.
yeah. Basically, yeah. So this is where this game ended. Um, I don't remember if I was the final. Basically, yeah. He wants to sacrifice. I mean, even here, if you sacrifice for the opponent, it's still completely winning.
Yeah.
But this is just turning the screw. Now I get my queen, and that was the game. So the key takeaways from this game were it's not like a universal truth that attacking your higher rated opponent is a good idea.
hmm
I've even heard people say, strong players say that it's more often the case that their lower rated opponents kind of flail against them and they just stay solid and then they end up winning.
Right.
This case I think was different because I had specific preparation to back up my aggressive mentality.
hmm
And when I did make a sacrifice, it was very I think it was based in reality. Like I was based on like a logical foundation. I wasn't like if my opponent played in a way that wasn't going to allow me to be aggressive, I would have not been aggressive. But because it was there, it was my choice.
hmm
So
And you took the gamble, and it worked out in your favor. And I think it's probably less of a gamble. It's probably a bad word to use there because everything was fundamentally based.
calculated risk.
Yeah. There you go. Thank you. Risk reward.
Mhm. So yeah, so that's definitely an interesting game,
hmm
psychologically, and worked in my favor. So everything must have been right, right?
that was awesome. That's an incredible attacking game with the London system.
Yeah, you can have some. The London has some poison,
hmm
uh, depending on the variation. It gets a bad rap for being boring, but that's only if you play it like
If
in a
you are
boring
boring.
way. Yeah, you.
All right, I'm very excited to see this next game here. I see a huge name about to pop up.
Yeah, so this is an older game.
Hmm.
So I had the it's funny, I still think this is one of the best, highlights. If I had a highlight reel of my life, as a huge chess fan and just like it's like winning the lottery to get
Hmm.
something like this. Basically, I got to play Magnus Carlsen in a simul through his app, the Play Magnus app. This was back when the app was still fairly fresh. He came out with the app, I think, around 2013-14 after he became world champion. The premise of the app, for those who aren't aware of it, is that you will play different levels of the computer that are designed to play like Magnus at different ages. Now, is that how it works? Not really. It doesn't play like Magnus. It just plays at different rating computer levels
Right.
with I think some preference for his openings that he played at those ages. But I was, imagine 2014. I'm a senior in high school. I've already found out that I'm going to college. Have a lot of downtime at school in between classes and stuff. I'm on that app playing, beating the low level computer as many times as possible, rack up those points. And eventually I get picked as one of the winners for this thing. So I get out to New York. I get flown out to New York by the Play Magnus team to meet and play Magnus. So
All right.
I'm fanboying all day long. I'm so excited. I'm with 11 other people from a pretty diverse group of. I think I think two other Americans. There was a Canadian, a German, two Norwegians, an Italian. Um, I might be missing somebody.
That's okay.
Two Canadians. Two Canadians. Basically, it was a very eclectic group of players from different walks of life, different rating levels, to play in this simul. So it got me a break out of school. It happened in May. So I got to skip some exams for a day or two. Actually, I had to take those exams early, but now I'm here. I get to play the simul, and I do some preparation too. I have a file. I have an old file named like Magnus Carlsen preparation, which is very funny. I got to prepare with some of my teammates at school, and I get here, and he plays the move that I hate the most, the English. It's the opening I had the least experience in preparation. I found always that in my tournament experience, not many people play the English. And since I wasn't primarily an E4, E5 player, I don't even have that much Sicilian experience.
Hmm.
Um, Yet I do play E4, C4, E5. So not feeling already first move. It's kind of funny. He plays his first move, and I'm already on my back foot. And so not really a testament to his strength, but more to my my weakness. But
Hmm.
that's the way this was developing. So I did have a game plan here, though. So it's not like I'm out of book. I actually have a setup in mind.
I'm
And
curious if he's strong enough to look at you and be like, yeah,
it
English.
was funny. I remember I was maybe board 3 or 4 in the lineup, and he played a different first move every game. It was like E4, D4, knight F3, and then it got to me and it was C4. So he was just having fun.
That's great.
So this is the year is 2015 for this game. In 2014 in the U.S. Championships, um, Grandmaster Varushin Akobian with the black pieces had played a game against Alexander Lenderman in a playoff game. So um, this was probably Akobian's best run at the U.S. Championship. I think he beat Lenderman and then had a playoff with Gata Komsky in the finals, and then Gata beat him and became the 2014 U.S. champion. I think Gata's been U.S. champion many, many times. But also, GM Akobian is someone that I knew and worked with through Castle Chess Camp.
Hmm.
So I was a big fan of his. I'd seen a lot of his games, and the setup that he employed was fairly easy to emulate.
Hmm.
Basically, what we're going to see is I'm going to play knight f6, knight c6, bishop c5, d6, a6, and not even necessarily in any given order. It's not the best setup for black, especially since Magnus plays it in a way that gets the most for white, as we'll see. G3. So these moves don't really matter. I was going to play these moves anyways. Because he waited on knight f3,
Hmm.
was kind of clever of him. This is the idea of playing these moves first.
Hmm.
When he sees bishop c5, he's going to play e3, and now he can play knight to e2 and play for d4
Hmm.
without worrying about maybe me pinning his knight. He's gonna grab the space in the center. So we play our moves. He's ready for d4 now, so I make a little space for my bishop. I think you can find that you can find a if you go on YouTube, you can find a Kobian explaining his whole U.S. Championship playoff game with Lunderman,
Hmm.
and he was always I think a5 is possible, and very often you'll see people play a5, especially in that Lunderman game where Lunderman prepared b4. But even there, he said, a6 is more solid. It's better to control this square. We don't really need to play a5, so play a6. And then also this move h6, not a necessary move, but I remember from that game commentary,
Hmm.
his reasoning was that when white plays d4, and we're probably going to take it because it will help make our bishop a bit stronger to be looking at a single pawn rather than a chain of pawns.
Hmm.
Especially if white were to play d5 and then we're just looking at e3 forever. Not makes our bishop not such a great piece to be on a7 looking at e3.
Right.
So when d4, we're probably going to take it, and then maybe we don't want bishop g5, knight d5. Our bishop's going to be sidelined here. It's going to be hard to break this pin. So this is kind of a prophylactical move. I don't think it's strictly necessary. I also haven't castled yet, so maybe bishop g5 isn't that big of a deal. But that's the reason why I played, these moves.
Hmm.
So I guess I forgot to maybe say from a psychological point, like the whole theme here is going to be playing opponents stronger than yourself.
Yeah.
This is a completely different feeling for me. Not only was this game before that other game 2 years prior,
Hmm.
I didn't have any of that aggressive mentality, and I'm already kind of out of book preparation, and having the right mentality going into the game really matters. And preparation can be part of that for sure. Because here, because I wasn't prepared, I was immediately psychologically on my back foot because I was like, first move, I don't want to play this.
Right.
Not a good feeling to have. There shouldn't be anything that you see, especially first move. That's pretty bad. Usually people there's like a certain variation they don't like, but so yeah. So I failed. I would say not only at the physical preparation, but also the mental preparation for
Hmm.
this game, which
And
was
from the black end, what do you normally play against like 1e4, 1d4? What is your style?
it varies. I err on the side of being more solid. For years, I would have played the Caro-Kann.
Hmm.
I've dabbled in a few other things, but what I would probably feel most confident, like theory wise, yeah, Caro-Kann.
Okay. Can
And
you give me a small idea as to like maybe there's something with the English that you can maybe transpose
sure,
similar
well,
lines?
now I might consider more strongly against c4 playing c6
Hmm.
and playing for d5. If you're comfortable playing the Slav, that's a good Slav Caro-Kann um, combination.
Hmm.
Very similar pawn structures. It gives you something to play against both e4, d4, and c4, and all the ready setups.
Hmm.
Definitely a lot of preparation has to be done there, but and there's some sidelines too. I think Brian is very fond of c4, c6. I can show that really briefly.
Yeah.
C4, c6, and the sneaky move queen a4. I first saw this move played by a national master in Georgia.
Hmm.
The premise being that the automatic d5 move no longer good because we can't take back with the pawn. It's a
Right.
very funny move, um, and you have to play something else.
Hmm.
Black is fine typically. Maybe they play e6, d5. Maybe they play e5. Maybe they play Rufi and Keto. But if it's not the structure that you're, it's like this is a psychological move more than it is. Like you're not playing this to get a physical advantage. You're playing this to get a psychological edge. Your opponent's going to play a structure that they're not familiar with.
Hmm.
They have to think as early as move two. It's about as bad as me seeing c4 and being like, oh man. So yeah,
Carlson
moving
probably
ahead.
would have played it too.
Yeah, so moving ahead a few moves already, you can see where I was very psychologically reliant on following the game of a Kobian.
Hmm.
Already, though, b3 deviates from that game. So far, same game. But in the Lenderman game, Lenderman played a3 to
Okay.
play the more aggressive b4. Magnus just plays b3, a bit more solid. It's probably more in his style
Mm-hmm.
to be more conservative, and especially during a simul game, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. How
Castles,
many players were there?
there were 12 of us,
Nice.
and the strongest of us was a FIDE master. But I think Magnus ended up beating all of us.
Not even a draw. Wow.
He was close. The FIDE master, the Italian FIDE master, was very close. He was the last game. Maybe if I'd held on a bit longer, it would have been more difficult for Magnus. So maybe it's my fault. It's like we were a team against him. Um, so I played this move Rook b8. Rook b8 was a move that was played in the Jacobian Lenderman game, and I emulated it without. Part of it was that Magnus was going by our boards really fast. We didn't have a clock, and there wasn't a real structured system for the simul. It was just like when he gets there, you play. And it doesn't help when he's like racing around the boards. So it's funny, he was playing 12 of us, but I felt like I was the one being time pressured. I knew less about the opening. He's just playing probably from memory from a game he saw or playing whatever he felt like. So the reason why Rook b8 was played in the Wonderman game was I can show that briefly here with,
Yeah.
with a3. Castles b4. So probably bishop b2 is here. I can't remember. But
Yeah.
basically, if we were to move our bishop out, suddenly we might have a problem here with getting our knight forced away. We have to play our knight over to the side here because our b7 pawn was hanging.
Mm-hmm.
We got forced out of the way. And I don't think my knight wants to be here, or it probably doesn't want to be here.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that was the reason. I don't know if that's the specific implementation of how white would do it, but then you'd have to worry about this all the time.
Right.
So, yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that if you're forced to go into awkward positions, you tend to try to avoid them.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so you can see my reasoning here is similar.
It's flexible.
But my bishop, there's no pawn coming to b5. It was for the wrong reason. Like maybe I'll still end up moving my knight and my bishop, but this is slow. It's not like it's a solid move, but it's slow. It's like it's already revealing that I had very little, like I was about to be out of book. I had no idea what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was feeling like I was someone under pressure here. So d4 happens. The rest of these moves happened. A lot of the moves here are quite simple. But already
Oof, he has a stranglehold in your bishop.
yeah, it's like, but at least this is why I took here. So that I could have the file at least in that. At least my bishop is his knight and bishop have to guard this because I have my own pressure on the pawn.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been better than if I was looking at a pawn on e3. So
right.
I remember in the game I did want to be kind of, I remember my thought into the game was to be a bit active if I could. Knight e4 isn't the best. I think I should just take this knight.
Okay.
Because maybe during the game I was afraid of pawn takes. I'll show that. And having a problem with my c7 pawn.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely not a reason for concern. I can always play bishop b6 if necessary. These pawns are pretty bad. His bishops are completely shut down. I think I was looking at a ghost. And, just taking bishop takes d5, maybe knight e7. I think I'm doing okay here, although it is very uncomfortable still.
Mm-hmm.
Because now now it's different. Without a knight to pressure d4, my bishop becomes much more entombed.
And all this stems from the one move Rook b8.
Well, that's part of it. I lost the tempo for no reason.
Okay.
And I played knight e4. It's not the best move. I have to move my bishop back. Queen moves out of tempo. So yeah, I'm putting myself in some pins potentially. My knight doesn't have a great retreat anymore. But this is a very interesting moment. Magnus plays the move knight e to c3, and this is not a good move. I don't know if the stream can see some of my variations here, but this is a great moment for a puzzle.
Yeah, and then go ahead and get rid of the.
I should have maybe done some puzzle moments with the other game as well.
It's all good. But yeah, guys, from YouTube as well, go ahead and feel free to pause your videos here and see if you can.
I can see on the stream it's showing the move. That's a shame. I should have forewarned you.
Ah, yeah, it's already there. Sorry. Well, guys, go ahead and test yourselves without looking at the answers. It is there on the bottom, though.
um, so did these get uploaded to YouTube?
Yep.
Okay, so
I mean, that was only the first move, so they still have to find the entire variation.
yeah, so the first move, as was shown at the bottom, I'll just go ahead and say it since it was already revealed.
Mhm.
It's a really brilliant move here. Knight takes f2. This is never something I would have seen. This is the kind of thing I would have seen if you told me there was something here
Yeah.
and gave me some time to think. In a time-sensitive situation, playing against the world champion, you don't see like, especially when you're not a really strong player,
Mhm.
like at his level, you don't see a move like this, and I missed it. But it's amazing because Black is going to end up slightly better here, even though I played a kind of I went a few moves wrong in the opening, but because of Magnus's last move,
Mhm.
he kind of got complacent with the defense of the d4 pawn, and this gave me a unique opportunity to sacrifice here because right off the bat, queen takes no good. It's not super simple. I'm not just taking here and winning the queen because he can block,
Mhm.
but I have strong follow-ups. All of a sudden, I have all sorts of you know pieces coming to life. This bishop isn't doing anything to help. This bishop isn't doing anything to help. This knight is pinned.
Mhm.
He can move the queen out of the way a bit, but I can start to do all sorts of
Keep the pressure going. Wow.
yeah. Um,
He's-
and he's getting a bit overrun. Black would be winning here, just
Mhm.
about.
You're threatening to take here, remove a defender of the rook. I mean, everything's.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so,
so
so are you saying like it was this moment? Had you found this knight move, possibly the FM would have won his game?
well, possibly I would have won the game, right?
Yeah, that too.
So there is this move. Also, you have to consider like, what if king takes?
Mhm.
But then all of a sudden, this king has a really hard time escaping
Mhm.
because it can't come to f1 to get out of the check
Oh my god.
position. Like we can imagine, yeah, my knight's threatening to move away with discovery.
Mhm.
The threats against the queen. Um, I think something like this is no good. I just take.
Mhm.
So yeah, huge problems. So actually, the best move here isn't to take the knight at all. In fact, the best move here is to well, first we trade off the rook
Mhm.
to get that out of some problems, and then you play knight f6. So you have to give the piece back. The reason why you play knight f6, it's an important intermediate move because it's with tempo.
Mhm.
Basically, white needs to defend this pawn at all costs. We can't do it this way because there's a really annoying check. We can't do it this way because it's it's not good enough.
Mhm.
It's like black has time to make problems here. I'm
Right.
going to get rid of this and then I'm going to win the pawn anyways. So you do it with tempo here so that you can go here instead.
Mhm.
And this is a very serious threat, obviously. And white's not going down a piece because they're going to get the piece back, but then this way we can defend this with tempo.
Mhm.
You
And
can
he probably
kind
would
of
have. He probably would have played this too.
I'm so curious what he would have played. It's
That would
too
have been
late
really
now.
cool.
We'll never know. But yeah, in this position, black is slightly better. Clearly,
Mhm.
uh, I have an extra pawn for starters. Um, he has two bishops. I think this would have been fine for white, but there's still some concrete problems to solve. I think like this is a nightmare scenario for a simul game
Mhm.
to calculate any of that. So really amazing opportunity here. Like when I looked at the game post-mortem with the computer to see if I missed anything, um, man, I was like,
Ah.
yeah, very shocking. Instead, I played a more normal move, but this is, white's better here. Very simply, my pieces are terrible. Compare these to like his rook is going to come in My bishop's not doing very much. He's a very strong outposted knight. Like this is gone. Something's gone wrong,
Mhm.
and that's a very easy reason why the computer is like already +3. Yeah, b5. I also missed a tactical point here. Knight f6, similar to before. This time though, knight f6 is a bit more deviously minded. My king is just very weak. There's no defenders here, and if the queen and bishop converge, and the rook is cutting my king off, I could just very easily get checkmated.
Mhm.
I didn't see the move knight f6 at all. When he played it, I was a bit, scratching my head. Well, I have to take it, so I can't lose my queen. That's a faster death. And then he plays this move, intermediate move. Bishop takes c6, and of course he does because otherwise I could maybe sacrifice a piece back on d4
Right.
to block here. I didn't take the bishop. You can take the bishop. If you do, right now I'm threatening again to give the piece back. If you were to take here, I'd be happy to force the queens off, give the piece back. Maybe it's tricky here. I have to contest the file, but I'll just play a move. You have to be very careful tactically, not to fall for things like this.
Yeah.
Being off the top of my head, but maybe here I would have lived a bit longer. But that's not what even happens. White just plays rook e3, and I'm in huge trouble. This is game over. Like now I can't even trade off the queens. My queen is complete. Like how do I get my queen back? I don't.
Mhm.
So I basically the computer's best move is to take, and that's game over. So I played queen f5, but even though I was able to get the queens off just for some peace of mind,
Mhm.
it's too late. My position's not only am I down a pawn, but my pieces are very poorly placed.
Mhm.
Like this is a huge problem. This is a monster piece. This is doing nothing. Very soon he can open up the other bishop. You can probably see the move again here. Very important moment, I think, psychologically. So I'm gonna put words in Magnus's mouth, but one thing that you always need to be mindful of, especially when you have a winning position or when you're playing a lower rated opponent and you're better, is to kill counterplay. So there's no reason for him to let me have anything. Like if he were to play some random move, like let's say h4, and maybe he does something this way, I can get in this move b4. At the very least, I can maybe try to get my rook out somehow. Because
Mhm.
right now my rook is doing absolutely nothing. No reason to let that happen. That's why the move b4 is very strong here. And I was hoping he wouldn't play it, and he played it instantly, of course. Very typical shutdown counterplay.
Mhm.
Um,
There's another phrase I
yeah,
heard. It's something about like enjoy your position.
yeah, it's got to be a Karpov kind of thing
Mhm.
where he was known as I think the boa constrictor or something,
Mhm.
because he would just squeeze the life out of someone. And I'm sure I also recently heard Gary Kasparov, who did a podcast interview with a well-known podcaster, say that Magnus was a lethal combination of Karpov and Fischer, which is, I mean, I think it's pretty fair to say.
Mhm.
I think you'd agree
Like he
that
can attack when he wants or needs to, and then he can also play crazy solid as well.
very, very balanced, has the best of all worlds.
Yeah.
So yeah, here it's just wrapping the game up. Exactly what I said happened. This bishop, impossible to get rid of,
Mhm.
controls both squares from which my rook can get out. Eventually, I'll try to get my rook out in this way,
Mhm.
but it's going to be too late. And even if I do, I let my opponent get in. So I flail a bit here, but just trying to do anything, but
Mhm.
it's a bit futile. And around this time, I realized that things are looking pretty grim, and I threw in the towel.
Hey, hey, hey. And he just did it. It was just a quiet king walk. He didn't really force anything at that point.
Nope. I don't. I think the computer even points out that that's not even the best move, but it looks pretty devastating,
Mhm.
as you might. I mean, doesn't it?
No,
So
well, yeah, it's main threats everywhere. Um, Wow.
So these were the games. The key takeaways here were basically the opposite of the first game when I was a bit wiser and a bit more prepared.
Hmm.
Um, yeah,
Like
I
this
think
game definitely taught you a lot.
yeah, having a game plan going into a game is very useful. But when your game plan doesn't work out, like when C4 was thrown in my face, even though I didn't want to see it,
Hmm.
don't like you have to be flexible because I think I was a bit timid in this game, and why wouldn't you be, right? But like even so, I could have
It's just a world champion.
yeah yeah I still could have checked my ego a bit and just been calm. Like sometimes you can just treat higher rated opponents and lower rated opponents as opponents
Hmm.
and not worry about rating is just a number. Sometimes these players have accolades, but it is an objective game, and if you can master yourself, then you give yourself the best chances
Hmm.
to not make a psychological blunder like underestimating someone or you know being winning and getting complacent. Like Magnus had no hesitation to play this move B4, even though it wasn't directly aimed at his plans to expand on the king side,
Hmm.
because why would he give me counterplay? So yeah, definitely very interesting games. As an underdog, I learned a lot from both games. It's important, especially to analyze your games when you lose or win, in like in a focused manner. Like
Hmm.
the first game was important because I had a plan and I executed it. That's worth analyzing. This one was I didn't have a plan and I got executed. So
Good way to
so
put it.
both yeah. So those are my games, and I hope that they were instructive.
Very, very much. And honestly, I love the way that you explain things. You're very level-headed, and it's my first time meeting you as well. Like talking face to face, somewhat. And no, this is excellent content. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this.
Absolutely. And guys, go ahead and feel free to check out the YouTube channel Palm Beach Chess. We will have this one uploaded as well. Darcy Linde here, or Linde, however you want to pronounce his name. Well, he also does chess lessons, so if you are interested, I don't know if you're still active right now for chess lessons.
Yeah, I would be. I'd
Okay.
be open to it.
Awesome, cool, cool. All right, so feel free, go ahead and give him a. We'll put his contact info somewhere around in the comments. So, thank you again, Darcy. Do you have any final words for us today? Maybe some reference to something?
Reference some Lord of the Rings references.
Go for it.
Um,
I kind of
oh,
threw you on the spot there. Sorry.
yeah, this is an important moment about preparation. Is not just for chess. Preparing your Lord of the Rings references is also very key. Um, I have nothing,
Okay.
sadly.
All right. So we'll have something next time potentially.
Yeah, for sure.
Alrighty, guys. Thank you so much again. You have a wonderful night, and all right, it's okay.